The morning started like any other Tuesday in London's historic district. Tourists gathered around the famous palace gates, cameras ready, hoping to catch a glimpse of the Royal Guards in their iconic red uniforms and tall bearskin hats. Among the crowd stood 17-year-old Marcus Wellington, though nobody recognized him at first. He wore a simple hoodie and jeans, his face partially hidden behind dark sunglasses. Marcus was the son of Blake Wellington, one of Hollywood's biggest action stars. Known for his roles in blockbuster movies that earned billions worldwide, Marcus had grown tired of the celebrity lifestyle. Every move he made was watched, photographed, and discussed on social media. His father's fame meant he could never just be a normal teenager. Bodyguards followed him to school, paparazzi waited outside his favorite coffee shop, and fans constantly asked for selfies. He felt trapped in a golden cage, always expected to smile, wave, and behave perfectly because he was Blake Wellington's son. That particular morning, Marcus had managed to slip away from his security detail during a family vacation in London. His parents were attending a formal dinner with British film executives, and Marcus had convinced them he wanted to sleep in at the hotel. Instead, he sneaked out through the service entrance, took the underground train, and headed straight to the palace. He had no plan, no real intention of causing trouble. He just wanted to feel free for a few hours, to walk around like any other tourist without bodyguards breathing down his neck. As he stood among the crowd, watching the Royal Guard stand perfectly still in front of the palace, an idea began to form in his mind. Marcus had always been fascinated by these guards who remained motionless despite tourists trying to make them laugh or react. He had seen countless videos online of people attempting silly pranks, but the guards never broke their discipline. Marcus wondered what it would take to actually get a reaction from one of them. He pulled out his phone and started recording, pretending to film the palace architecture. Slowly, he moved closer to one particular guard, a tall man who stood rigid as a statue, his bearskin hat adding nearly a foot to his already impressive height. The guard's eyes stared straight ahead, his expression completely blank. Marcus felt his heart racing. He knew what he was about to do was wrong, possibly even illegal, but the rebellious part of him didn't care. He was tired of always following rules, always being the perfect celebrity son. The crowd around him grew thicker as tourists jostled for better photos. Marcus used this to his advantage, moving even closer to the guard. He could see the details of the man's uniform now, the polished buttons, the pristine white gloves, the way his rifle was held at exactly the right angle. The guard was a living statue, a symbol of British tradition and discipline. And Marcus was about to disrespect that tradition in the most public way possible. He thought about his father, who had built his career on playing heroes who followed rules and did the right thing. Blake Wellington was America's favorite action star precisely because he represented old-fashioned values like honor, duty, and respect. What would his father think if he could see Marcus now? What would the millions of fans who looked up to the Wellington family say when they found out what he was about to do? But these thoughts only made Marcus more determined. He was sick of living up to everyone's expectations, tired of being judged by his father's reputation. For once, he wanted to do something completely reckless, something that would make people see him as his own person, not just Blake Wellington's kid. Even if that meant becoming infamous instead of famous. The guard remained perfectly still, unaware of the teenager plotting just a few feet away. Other tourists continued taking photos, chattering in different languages, pointing at various parts of the palace. Nobody paid special attention to Marcus. He was just another face in the crowd, anonymous, despite being the son of one of the world's most recognizable actors. This anonymity gave him courage. Marcus checked his phone to make sure it was still recording. The video already showed the crowd, the palace, and the guard standing at attention. This would be the proof, the evidence of what he was about to do. Part of him wanted this moment documented, wanted the world to see him break free from his perfect image. Another part of him whispered warnings, reminded him of consequences, but he pushed those thoughts away. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, his hand reaching up toward the guard's bearskin hat. Time seemed to slow down. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it. This was the point of no return. In seconds, he would either chicken out and walk away, remaining the obedient celebrity son everyone expected him to be, or he would follow through with his plan and change everything. Marcus's fingers wrapped around the thick fur of the bearskin hat and pulled. The hat came off easier than he expected, suddenly free from the guard's head. For a split second, everything froze. The guard's face showed complete shock, his professional composure shattered. His eyes went wide, his mouth opened slightly. Marcus could see the man's military training battling against pure surprise. The other tourists nearby gasped collectively, some pointing, others quickly raising their phones to capture what was happening. The guard's reaction was immediate and trained. He stepped forward sharply, his hand reaching for the hat, but Marcus had already darted backward into the crowd. The teenager held the bearskin hat high above his head like a trophy, a wild grin spreading across his face. For that brief moment, he felt completely alive, completely free. The adrenaline rushing through his body made everything seem brighter, sharper. It's more real than anything he had experienced in months. But reality crashed back quickly. The guard shouted something Marcus couldn't quite hear over the noise of the crowd. Other guards who had been stationed nearby began moving toward the commotion. Tourists scattered in different directions, some trying to get out of the way, others pushing closer to film the chaos. Marcus realized with sudden clarity that he had just committed a serious offense against one of Britain's most respected institutions. He tried to push through the crowd. Still holding the hat, his phone forgotten in his other hand, where it continued recording everything. People were shouting now, some in anger, some in excitement. A woman yelled at him in a British accent he could barely understand, something about respect and disgrace. A man tried to grab his arm, but Marcus twisted away, using moves he had learned from his father's stunt coordinators. During movie set visits, the original guard had recovered from his shock and was now pursuing Marcus with determined steps. Though his military bearing kept him from running wildly, 2 other guards had joined the pursuit, their movements coordinated and professional. Palace security officers in different uniforms appeared from seemingly nowhere, speaking urgently into radios. Marcus suddenly understood the gravity of what he had done. This wasn't just a harmless prank anymore. He had disrupted official royal guards, probably violated multiple laws, and created an international incident. He spotted a gap in the crowd and pushed through, the bearskin hat still clutched in his hands. The hat was heavier than it looked, the fur thick and real, not synthetic like he had imagined. He could feel the weight of centuries of British tradition in his hands, and shame began mixing with his fading adrenaline rush. What had seemed like a rebellious act of freedom now felt childish and stupid. Marcus ran toward the palace gates, but more security officers were converging on that area. He changed direction, heading toward the crowded street beyond the palace grounds. Tourists continued filming everything, their phones held high, capturing every moment of his escape attempt. He knew these videos would be online within minutes, shared across every social media platform, going viral before he could even explain himself. His hood fell back during his run, exposing his face fully. Someone in the crowd recognized him immediately. A teenage girl shrieked, "That's Marcus Wellington!" Blake Wellington's son. The recognition spread through the crowd like wildfire. More phones turned toward him, people pushing closer, shouting his name. The situation had transformed from a prank gone wrong into a celebrity, a scandal in real time. Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. He hadn't thought this through at all. In his desperate desire to rebel against his controlled life, he had created something far worse than anything he had been trying to escape. His father's reputation would be damaged. His mother would be devastated. The media would have a field day. The headlines were already writing themselves in his mind. Hollywood star's son attacks Royal Guard. Celebrity teen disrespects British tradition. Wellington family scandal. He finally stopped running, breathing hard, surrounded by tourists and security officers closing in from all sides. The bearskin hat dangled from his hand, looking ridiculous now instead of triumphant. One of the guards approached him calmly, but firmly, hand extended. "Son, you need to return that immediately and come with us," the guard said in a stern but not unkind voice. The man's accent was thick, proper British. the kind Marcus associated with period dramas and Shakespeare. Marcus looked down at the hat, then back at the crowd of people filming him. His phone had stopped recording at some point during the chase, but dozens of other phones had captured everything. There was no hiding from this, no pretending it hadn't happened. No way his father's expensive lawyers could make this disappear. He had wanted to make his own mark, to step out of his father's shadow. Well, he had certainly done that, but not in any way he had imagined. He slowly extended the hat toward the guard, his hand shaking slightly. The moment the guard took it, Marcus felt the weight of his actions settle fully onto his shoulders. The security office inside the palace complex was nothing like Marcus had imagined. He had expected cold, sterile rooms like the police stations shown in movies. Instead, he sat in a surprisingly comfortable chair in a wood-paneled office that smelled faintly of tea and old books. 2 palace security officers stood near the door, while a senior official, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and perfectly styled gray hair, sat across from him reviewing paperwork. Marcus had been given water and asked surprisingly polite questions about his identity. When he confirmed he was Marcus Wellington, son of Blake Wellington, the atmosphere in the room had shifted slightly. Not in a good way, Marcus noted. If anything, the officials seemed more concerned. An incident involving a celebrity's child meant media attention, international complications, and diplomatic considerations. His phone had been confiscated, though the officer assured him it was temporary and would be returned. Marcus wondered desperately if his parents had been contacted yet. His father was probably still at the dinner, completely unaware that his son was being detained by British palace security. His mother might be back at the hotel, perhaps just now discovering that Marcus wasn't in his room like he had claimed. The senior official, who had introduced herself as Mrs. Patricia Blackwood, head of palace security operations, finally looked up from her documents. "Mr. Wellington," she began, her voice crisp and professional, "do you understand the severity of what you've done?" Marcus nodded, unable to meet her eyes. The rebellious energy that had fueled his prank had completely evaporated, replaced by a heavy sense of dread and regret. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. "I don't think you do," Mrs. Blackwood continued. "Those guards are serving members of Her Majesty's military. What you did constitutes assault on a service member, performing official duties. The bearskin hats they wear are part of ceremonial military uniform, dating back centuries. Beyond the legal implications, you've shown profound disrespect for British tradition and military service." Each word hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had known what he was doing was wrong, but hearing it laid out so formally made it much worse. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I didn't think—" "No, you didn't think," Mrs. Blackwood interrupted. "That's precisely the problem. You're 17 years old, not a child. You're old enough to understand consequences, especially given your background. Your father is a public figure who has built his career on playing honorable men. What do you think this incident will do to his reputation?" That question hurt most of all because Marcus had been trying to separate himself from his father's reputation. Instead, he had just made everything worse. Whatever he did now would reflect on Blake Wellington. His selfish attempt at rebellion would become his father's embarrassment. Before Marcus could respond, there was a knock on the door. One of the security officers opened it, and Marcus heard a familiar voice that made his stomach drop. His father had arrived, and he did not sound happy. Blake Wellington's voice carried the particular tone Marcus had heard only a few times in his life, usually when something very serious had happened. It was his father's real voice, not the charming movie star voice he used for interviews, but the actual concerned parent voice. Mrs. Blackwood stood up. "Mr. Wellington, please come in. We were just discussing the situation with your son." Blake Wellington entered the room, and Marcus finally looked up at his father. The famous actor looked older somehow, tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. He wore the expensive suit from his dinner meeting, but his tie was loosened and his perfectly styled hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly. His blue eyes, the same shade as Marcus's own, were filled with a mixture of anger, disappointment, and worry. "Marcus," his father said, his voice controlled but tight. "What on earth were you thinking?" Marcus opened his mouth, but found he had no answer that wouldn't sound pathetic. "I wanted to. I just He trailed off helplessly. Blake turned to Mrs. Blackwood. "I apologize profusely for my son's behavior. This is completely unacceptable, and I assure you we take this extremely seriously. Whatever consequences are appropriate, we'll accept them fully. I also want to personally apologize to the guard who was targeted. Is he all right?" Mrs. Blackwood's expression softened slightly. The guard, Corporal Davies, was understandably upset and embarrassed, but he's physically fine. He's a professional soldier with years of service. What bothers him most is that the incident was filmed and will likely spread online, making him the subject of mockery. Blake's jaw tightened. Then we need to control the narrative immediately. My publicist needs to issue a statement. We need to reach out directly to Corporal Davies with a formal apology. And Marcus needs to face appropriate consequences both legally and personally. Marcus watched his father take charge of the situation with the same decisiveness he brought to his movie roles. But this wasn't a movie. This was real, and Marcus had created a real problem that would have real consequences. He thought about Corporal Davies, a man just doing his job, now humiliated because a spoiled celebrity kid wanted to feel rebellious. Mrs. Blackwood nodded. "We appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Wellington. The Metropolitan Police have been notified as this technically occurred in a public area under their jurisdiction. They'll want to speak with Marcus as well. Given his age and the circumstances, we're hoping this can be resolved without pressing formal charges. But that will depend on several factors, including Corporal Davies' wishes and the public response." The police interview took place in a different building, a proper Metropolitan Police station that matched Marcus's expectations much better than the Palace Security Office. The room was small, institutional, with a metal table and hard chairs. A police constable, a stern-looking man in his 40s, named Officer Thompson, asked questions while Blake sat beside his son. Marcus's mother had arrived by this point too, her face streaked with tears, though she hadn't said much beyond hugging Marcus tightly when she first saw him. Officer Thompson went through the incident systematically. What time had Marcus left the hotel? Why did he go to the palace? Did he plan the hat snatching beforehand, or was it impulsive? How did he think the guard would react? Did he understand he was committing an offense? Marcus answered honestly, his voice getting quieter with each question. Yes, it was impulsive. No, he didn't really think about the guard's reaction. Yes, he knew it was wrong, but did it anyway. Why? Officer Thompson finally asked, setting down his pen and looking directly at Marcus. Help me understand why a young man with every advantage, with a good family and a comfortable life, would do something so foolish. Marcus struggled to articulate what he had felt earlier that morning. The words that had seemed so clear in his mind now sounded hollow and selfish when spoken aloud. I wanted to feel like my own person, he said finally, not just Blake Wellington's son. I'm tired of everyone watching me, expecting me to be perfect because of who my dad is. I thought if I did something unexpected, something rebellious, it would prove I'm my own person. Officer Thompson leaned back in his chair. And how did that work out for you? The question wasn't sarcastic, just genuinely curious. Marcus shook his head. It didn't. It just made everything worse. I embarrassed my family, disrespected that guard. And now everyone's watching me even more than before. But for all the wrong reasons. His father put a hand on his shoulder. And Marcus felt tears threatening for the first time since the incident. He blinked them back, not wanting to cry in front of the police officer. But the weight of everything was becoming too much. Officer Thompson closed his notebook. Here's what's going to happen. Because you're 17 and this is your first offense, and because you're being cooperative and showing genuine remorse, I'm going to recommend to the Crown Prosecution Service that formal charges not be filed. However, this doesn't mean there are no consequences. You'll receive a formal caution, which will remain on your record. You'll need to write a formal apology to Corporal Davies, and I strongly suggest you meet with him in person if he's willing. Additionally, we're recommending mandatory community service. Marcus nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Whatever is appropriate. I'll do anything to make this right. Over the following hours, as statements were finalized and paperwork processed, the incident exploded across social media exactly as Marcus had feared. Videos from multiple angles showed him snatching the hat, running through the crowd, being pursued by guards. The hashtag Royal Hat Prank was trending worldwide. News websites had picked up the story, and headlines ranged from amused to outraged. Some people found it funny, a harmless prank by a teenager. Others were furious, calling it disrespectful to British tradition and military service. Many criticized Blake Wellington's parenting, suggesting that celebrity children were spoiled and entitled. Blake's publicist had issued a statement. On behalf of the family, we are deeply sorry for the incident that occurred today at the palace. Marcus made a serious error in judgment and is taking full responsibility for his actions. We have the utmost respect for the Royal Guards, British military service members, and the traditions they represent. Marcus is cooperating fully with authorities and will personally apologize to Corporal Davies. We ask for privacy as our family addresses this matter. The statement was professional and appropriate, but Marcus knew it wouldn't stop the media frenzy. His father's upcoming movie premiere was scheduled for next month. Now all the press attention would focus on this scandal instead of the film. Blake had worked for 2 years on that movie. Marcus had potentially damaged its success. Late that evening, back at the hotel, Marcus finally got his phone back. It was flooded with messages. Friends from back home asking if the videos were really him. Fellow celebrity kids offering sympathy or asking what had happened. Some messages were cruel. Strangers who had somehow gotten his number calling him spoiled, stupid, disrespectful. His social media accounts, which his parents' team managed carefully, had been temporarily shut down to prevent further drama. His mother sat on the edge of his bed while his father paced the hotel room. "We need to talk about what happens next," Blake said finally, his voice calmer now but still serious. "Beyond the legal consequences, we need to address why this happened. Marcus, if you're struggling with the pressure of our lifestyle, we need to find better ways for you to cope than pulling stunts like this." Marcus nodded, staring at his hands. "I know. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to embarrass you or hurt your career. I just felt so trapped, and I thought doing something wild would make me feel free. But it just made everything worse." His mother touched his face gently. "Sweetheart, being your own person doesn't mean rejecting your family or acting out. It means finding your own path while still maintaining respect for others and yourself. What you did today wasn't freedom. It was just recklessness." 3 days later, Marcus stood outside Corporal James Davies's modest home in a quiet London neighborhood. His father stood beside him, both dressed in simple, respectful clothing. They had spent the previous days working with Mrs. Blackwood and military liaisons to arrange this meeting. Corporal Davies had initially been reluctant, but finally agreed to see them. Though he had made it clear he wasn't interested in any publicity or media involvement, the door opened, and Marcus came face to face with the man whose life he had disrupted. Without his ceremonial uniform and bearskin hat, Corporal Davies looked different, more human somehow. He was in his early 30s, with short brown hair and a neat beard. His expression was guarded but not hostile. He invited them inside, where his wife, a kind-looking woman named Sarah, offered tea. They sat in the modest living room, and Marcus noticed photos on the walls showing Corporal Davies in various military settings, including deployments overseas. This wasn't just a man who stood guard for tourists. This was a professional soldier who had served his country in dangerous places. Someone who had earned his position through dedication and sacrifice. Marcus had prepared an apology, written and rewritten it dozens of times, but now all those carefully crafted words seemed inadequate. "Corporal Davies," he began, his voice shaky, "I want to apologize for what I did. It was disrespectful, thoughtless, and cruel. I treated you like you were just a prop for my entertainment, and that was completely wrong. You were doing your job, serving your country, upholding a tradition that means something important. And I violated that because I was being selfish and stupid." Corporal Davies listened, without interrupting, his face unreadable. Blake added, "My son's actions don't reflect our family's values or my personal respect for military service. I've had the honor of working with veterans and active service members throughout my career, and I know the sacrifices you make. What Marcus did was unacceptable." There was a long moment of silence. Then Corporal Davies spoke, his voice measured and thoughtful. "I appreciate you coming here. That took courage, especially given all the media attention. I won't lie, what happened was humiliating. I've served in combat zones, faced actual danger, and maintained my composure. But having a teenager snatch my hat in front of hundreds of tourists while cameras recorded it, that was a different kind of difficult. My mates in the unit won't let me forget this for years." Marcus felt his face burning with shame. "I'm so sorry. If I could take it back, I would. If there's anything I can do to make amends," Corporal Davies held up a hand. "Here's what I want you to understand. That uniform, that hat, they represent something bigger than me or you. They represent centuries of British military tradition, soldiers who came before me, many of whom died protecting that tradition. When you disrespected me, you were disrespecting all of them. Do you understand that?" Marcus nodded, tears finally escaping despite his efforts to hold them back. "Yes, sir. I understand now. I didn't think about any of that before. I was only thinking about myself." The corporal's expression softened slightly. "You're 17? Teenagers make stupid decisions. I made my share at your age, though thankfully without hundreds of cameras recording them. The question is, what do you learn from this? Do you become bitter and defensive, or do you actually grow from it?" Sarah Davies spoke for the first time. "Our daughter is 14. She saw the videos online. She asked me why someone would do something so mean to her dad. That was hard to answer." Marcus looked at Sarah Davies, imagining a teenage girl seeing her father humiliated online, trying to defend him to her friends at school. He had created ripples far beyond what he had imagined. "I'm sorry to your whole family," he said sincerely. "I never thought about how this would affect people beyond just that moment." They talked for another hour. Corporal Davies shared what his job really entailed, the training required. The discipline needed to stand perfectly still while tourists did everything they could to distract the guards. He explained how the guards were selected from elite military units, how wearing that uniform was an honor, not just a job. Marcus listened, genuinely interested, learning things he had never considered. Before they left, Corporal Davies made an unexpected offer. "I've been thinking about the community service you're required to do. What if you spent some of those hours working with military veterans organizations, really learning about service and sacrifice? It might give you perspective." Blake immediately agreed, and Marcus accepted gratefully. This wasn't just a punishment anymore. It was an opportunity to actually learn something, to understand the values he had disrespected. Over the following weeks, Marcus kept his word. He volunteered at veterans centers, listened to stories from soldiers who had served in various conflicts, and learned about the real costs of military service. He met veterans dealing with physical injuries, PTSD, and the challenges of transitioning back to civilian life. He helped organize fundraising events, packed care packages for deployed troops, and spent time just talking with veterans who needed someone to listen. The media attention gradually faded as other stories took over the news cycle. Blake's movie premiere went well despite the scandal, partly because Blake handled press questions about the incident with honesty and grace, neither making excuses for Marcus nor exploiting the situation. Marcus stayed mostly out of the public eye, focusing on his community service and his education. 6 months after the incident, Marcus wrote a longer reflection piece that his father's publicist helped him publish. He wrote honestly about what he had learned, how his perspective had changed, how he now understood that true freedom didn't come from rebelling against structure, but from finding purpose within it. He thanked Corporal Davies publicly for his grace and forgiveness, and encouraged other young people to think carefully about their actions and consider the people they might hurt. Corporal Davies sent him a brief message after reading the piece. "Well done, son. You've learned what many people twice your age still don't understand. Keep moving forward." Marcus kept that message saved on his phone. Whenever he felt the old frustrations returning, whenever the pressures of being Blake Wellington's son seemed too much, he would read those words again and remember the real lesson he had learned. True character wasn't about making a dramatic gesture or proving independence through rebellion. It was about taking responsibility, learning from mistakes, respecting others, and finding meaning in service rather than selfishness. He still struggled sometimes with his identity. with figuring out who Marcus Wellington was beyond being someone's son. But now he approached that challenge differently, with more maturity and thoughtfulness. He finished high school and chose to attend college away from Hollywood, studying international relations with a focus on military history. He continued volunteering with veterans organizations, finding genuine purpose in that work. The viral videos of him snatching the guard's hat were still online. It's a permanent record of his worst moment. But Marcus learned to accept that too. Everyone makes mistakes, he realized. What matters is what you do afterward, how you grow, and whether you become someone who learns from failure rather than being defined by it. The prank would always be part of his story, but it didn't have to be the end of his story. It could be the beginning of something better.